On a dark morning in July 2009 in the northern Missouri town of Hannibal, Mike Bizzelli photographed his first dogfight rescue. He looked inside one plywood box and saw only teeth. Out walked a dog, dragging her chain, her mouth open in a snarl. He turned to Tim Rickey, then head of the Humane Society's Animal Cruelty Task Force, and said, "Watch out, Tim, here's a mean one." Rickey then knelt and embraced the dog whose hips were wagging like crazy. "She's not mean," Rickey told Bizzelli. "She's had her lips cut off." To Bizzelli's surprise, he was right. She wasn't mean at all, the photographer says now. It was pretty cool to get licked by a pit bull fight dog with no lips, and all you could feel was her teeth and her tongue running over your cheek. The lipless dog was Faye, one of 407 dogs rescued 10 years ago in Missouri and Illinois during coordinated raids conducted by a multi-agency task force. The investigation began in northern Missouri and eventually expanded across 8 states. It was the biggest dogfighting bust in U.S. history. The number of rescued dogs soon surpassed 500. 21 of those seized were pregnant and gave birth to nearly 150 puppies. The sting operation would become known as the Missouri 500. Rescuers were overwhelmed by the sheer number of animals. They had been expecting only 250 to 300 dogs. When as many as double that number arrived at facilities across the Midwest and South, volunteers scrambled to care for dogs suffering from severe injuries and illnesses. Originally, only 15% were expected to be in good enough condition to be relocated. Of the dogs taken in by the Missouri Humane Society, more than 50% were relocated. Still, not all were so lucky. Faye passed away just over 5 months after her rescue and adoption in a mouth repair surgery. Others were euthanized, but another dog from that rescue, Dharma, found with an amputated leg, trained as a therapy dog for children with missing limbs, one of many such redemptive stories. A year and a half earlier, the story was different. In 2008, an FBI-led domestic terrorism task force received a tip that an organized militia group had a sideline guarding dogfights in rural Missouri. After 3 months of trying unsuccessfully to crack the dogfighting ring, the FBI pulled out of the investigation. But a Missouri state trooper who had worked on the task force decided to push forward on the investigation along with a fellow trooper. It wasn't easy. Star NFL quarterback Michael Vick had been sentenced to prison the year before for his involvement in dogfighting, and fighters were particularly paranoid about any newcomers. The agents decided that to be successful, they'd have to put actual dogs in the fights, a decision reached after long discussions with the top officials in Highway Patrol. The Missouri Humane Society ultimately joined the effort, with Rickey helping the undercover agents pass as dogfighters. After establishing a relationship with a prominent breeder, they were inside the ring. Beginning in Missouri and southern Illinois, the undercover officers eventually found themselves in Oklahoma and Texas, amassing over 150 contacts and 80 fights. By July 2009, the investigators had identified a massive network of dogfighters spanning across the 8 states. On the morning of the raids, law enforcement teams swarmed 29 properties from Missouri to Texas. Along with the dogs, they seized more than 200 firearms and arrested 26 people on more than 100 felony charges. For Debbie Hill, Vice President of Operations for the Missouri Humane Society, the raids on that July 2009 morning presented the beginning of her challenge. She was among a tight circle of people who knew in advance about the sting operation. But she was sworn to secrecy, giving her little ability to prepare her staff for the massive influx of animals. She called a 7 a.m. meeting on the day of the raids with her staff, the first they'd heard anything about the operation. "We went into an open warehouse and we built cages," Hill says. "We didn't have hoses and drains. We had to modify a lot of this stuff sometimes by the seat of our pants to make it all go. She and her staff took care of the hundreds of emotionally and physically abused dogs. Within 3 days, every rescued dog had been medically examined. Formal behavioral evaluations began 2 weeks later. Hill gave bi-weekly updates on the animal's conditions and placement recommendations to federal courts. Support poured in from across the continent. Hill says 329 volunteers from across the country and Canada helped take care of over 400 dogs during that hot summer, a monumental undertaking. The emergency shelter ran for 7 months. Aided by other animal welfare organizations, the Humane Society found permanent homes in 18 different states for more than half of the dogs. But Hill says they couldn't place every animal from the group, and it was not safe for some to re-enter the community. Those dogs were eventually euthanized. These animals were victims, she says, describing the horrible exploitation the animals had endured at the hands of dogfighters. It's because of a flaw in other people's humanity, and we have to do what we can to stop that. And we have to do what we can to educate people about how the animals ended up where they did and what their capacity really is. Hill says the pit bull, contrary to popular belief, is a human-friendly animal that is focused on pleasing people. For Bezelli, meeting Faye taught him that lesson immediately. He followed some of the rescued dogs from their abusive environments to new homes. He says that these dogs possess great compassion. He turned the experience into a new book, Last Day on a Chain, stories of compassion, salvation, and misperceptions that he hopes will break those misperceptions. Hill also hopes to help people understand. That is part of the saddest thing, when you take man's best friend and you make him do this for your entertainment, she says. If given a choice, most of these animals would much rather be in your lap, picking ice cream from your fingers, than anything else in the world. In the decade since the Missouri 500, expectations for dogs rescued from fighting have changed. More work and resources are now devoted to identifying animals that can be rehabilitated and rehomed. Hill says that wasn't the standard 10 years ago. We worked hard to have as many good outcomes as we had, she says. To have any kind of positive outcome had been almost unheard of to that point. And while Hill would love to say that dogfighting has been eradicated, she knows there is more work to be done. It can be challenging, frustrating, dirty, and smelly. She says her clothes are covered in hair, but she thinks it's important. Animals touch every part of our lives, she says. It's part of our story, our humanity, that makes these animals important to us. And how we treat them is important, and it's indicative of how we treat each other.
Well, you didn't have to live in Missouri in 2009 to remember the Missouri 500. It was and still is one of the largest dogfighting busts in U.S. history, spanning 7 states. 26 people were arrested in the undercover operation that saved at least 500 dogs. More than 100 had to be put down from their injuries. Five on Your Side was there when some of the ringleaders appeared in court back then. Of those arrested, 4 Missouri men were sentenced to 1 year and a day in prison after pleading guilty to federal animal fighting laws. Now, the details of that bust are disturbing, infuriating if you're an animal lover, and what's worse, it's still going on everywhere. And no one knows that better than the photographer who tags along with the Humane Society of Missouri when they break up these dogfighting rings. He was there 10 years ago for the Missouri 500 bust, and he continues to share these stories today. It's all to put an end to this culture of animal cruelty.
Dogfighting is everywhere. I've been to the middle of nowhere in Missouri in a snowstorm.
Photography has been Mike Bezelli's passion for 47 years.
What are you doing, buddy?
He would take pictures of everything. But 10 years ago, his focus changed.
I photographed and documented the first dogfight bus, was the largest in U.S. history, and that was the Missouri 500. And on the eve of that trip, I was a little anxious, and it is a little unnerving when about 20 or 30 pit bulls come out of there enclosures, dragging their chains.
Bezelli thought he was there to photograph monsters, and he was sure he'd found one when he locked eyes with Faye.
It was still pretty early in the morning. It was still pretty dark out, but in this plywood box, I saw this dog. It was a black dog, and all I could see was teeth. And I called over to Tim Rickey, who was in charge of the operation, and I said, Tim, watch out, man. Here's a mean one. She's showing me nothing but teeth. And Tim came up, and he went right up to her, and he knelt down, and he embraced her. And he said, she's not mean. She's had her lips cut off. This is Faye. Oh, God. And it's pitiful, isn't it?
That first bust was eye-opening for Bezelli.
There are thousands of dog fighters in this country, and that means there are tens of thousands of dogs on chains like that.
His pictures and experiences are now part of a photo documentary called Last Day on a Chain.
I hope it sheds light and dispels this myth that these dogs are monsters. They're not.
It follows these dogs from their rescue to their rehab, and for many, their second chance at life. Todd and Amy Rebick adopted 2 pit bulls who came from dog-fighting situations. 12-year-old Ellie.
We believe she was just used for breeding.
And 10-year-old Carl.
He was more of a case of a city, street fighting situation and chained up in a yard. Fortunately, the right people showed up at the right time and got him out of there.
For every success story like this one, there's many more dogs still on chains.
It's big money. A grand champion is a winner of 5 fights, and its offspring will be worth thousands of dollars.
What is it going to take to put an end to this dog fighting?
It's up to prosecutors and judges to inflict maximum prison time and fines for these people. It's just a cruel, cruel adventure.
It is. It's so heartbreaking. And this is the book, guys. It's called Last Day on a Chain. The good news is they reached their goal on the Kickstarter campaign. So now he will be able to publish this and hopefully sell a lot of copies, spread the message, and put an end to this, because I just can't believe that it's going on.
Well, as you can see from the dogs that were adopted, these aren't bad animals.
No.
It's bad training that led them to have the behavior that they had. So, you know, the whole pit bull thing, you know, allow these dogs to be good dogs. They can do that.